Good evening to all of you. Shabbat Shalom. Welcome to our service. We're delighted that you are with us virtually this evening. This evening we are back to our prayer books, so online on the virtual prayer book, we're going to begin our service with Shalom Aleichem, virtual page 24.
Shalom Aleichem, Malachei Hasharet, Malachei Elyon, Melech Malachei Hamlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Lachem Leshalom, Malachei Hashalom, Malachei Elyon, Melech Malachei Hamlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Baruchuni Leshalom, Malachei Hashalom, Malachei HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Tzedchem Leshalom, Malachei Hashalom, Malachei Elyon, Melech Malachei Hamlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu.
We welcome Shabbat now with the kindling of the Sabbath lights as we turn in our virtual prayer books to pages 20 and 21. As these Shabbat candles give light to all who behold them, so may we by our lives give light to all who behold us, as their brightness reminds us of the generations of Israel who have kindled light, so may we in our own day be among those who kindle light.
Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu להדליק נר של שבת.
We continue now with the Chatzi Kaddish on page 44.
יתגדל ויתקדש שמי רבה, בעלמא דברך ידותה וימליך מלכותה, בחייכון וביומכון ובחיי כל בית ישראל, בעגלה ובזמן קריב והימרו אמן. גשם רבה מברך לעולם ולעלמי המיה, יתברך יתברך וישתבח ויצפה ויתרומם ויתנשא ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל שמד קודשה בריחו נעלה מן כל ברכתה ושירתה תושבחתה ונחמתה אדם ידן בעלמה ויאמרו אמן.
We turn now to page 46 in our virtual prayer books as we rise for the Baruch Hu, the call to worship.
Baruch Hu et Adonai HaMevorach Baruch Adonai HaMevorach Le'olam Vaed.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bidvaro ma'ariv aravim v'chochma potech she'arim uvidvuna mishanei itim umachalif et hazmanim umesader et hakochavim b'mishmaratem barakia kertzono b'rayom v'layla golel or mipnei choshech v'choshech mipnei or uma'avir yom umevi layla umavdil ben yom uvein layla Adonai Tzavaot Shemo El Chai V'Kayam Tamid Yimloch Aleinu Le'olam Va'ed Baruch Atah Adonai HaMa'ariv Aravim.
Ahavat Olam Beit Yisrael ונשמח בדברי תורתך ובמצוותיך לעולם ועד כי הם חיינו לאורך ימינו Adonai Eloheinu אחדותו לעולם ועד.
You may be seated as we continue with the V'ahavta.
ואהבת את אדוני אלוהיך בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מקודך. והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבביך. ושיננתם לבניך ודיברת בם בשבתך בביתך ובלכתך בדרך ובשוכבך ובקומך. וקשרתם להות על ידיך והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך. וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך למען תזכרו ועשיתם כל מצוותי והייתם קדושים לעליכם. אני אדוני אלוהיכם אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים להיות לכם לאלוהים. אני אדוני אלוהיכם.
You shall love Adonai your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your might. Take to heart these instructions with which I charge you this day. Impress them upon your children. Recite them when you stay at home and when you are away, when you lie down and when you get up. Bind them as a sign on your hand and let them serve as a symbol on your forehead. Inscribe them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates. Thus you shall remember to observe all my commandments and to be holy to your God. I am Adonai your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt to be your God. I am Adonai your God. Page 57 in our virtual prayer books. Standing on the parted shores of history, we still believe what we were taught before ever we stood at Sinai's foot, that wherever we go, it is eternally Egypt, that there is a better place, a promised land, that the winding way to that promise passes through the wilderness, that there is no way to get from here to there except by joining hands, marching together.
Bahanim Adonai, mi kamocha nedar bakodesh, nor atilot osefele, nor atilot osefele, malechutecha rahu בוקעיים לפני משה ומירם זעילי זעילי ענו ואמרו אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד ונאמר כי פדה אדוני את יעקב וגואלו מיד חזק ממנו ברוך אתה אדוני גאל ישראל.
Page 61. Give us a place to rest, Adonai our God. Bring us into shelter in the soft, long evening shadows of your truth. For with you are true protection and safety, and in your presence our acceptance and gentle love. Watch over us as we go forth. Prepare for us as we return. Spread over us your shelter of peace, over all we love, over our Jerusalem and yours. Baruch atah Adonai, porei sukat shalom aleinu, ve'al kol amo Yisrael, ve'al Yerushalayim.
ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם. ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם. ביני ובין בני ישראל אותי לעולם לעולם. ביני ובין בני ישראל אותי לעולם לעולם. ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם. ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם. כי ששת ימים עשה אדוני את השמיים ואת הארץ, וביום השביעי שבת וינפש. ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם. ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם, לדורותם ברית עולם.
Prayer invites God's presence to suffuse our spirits, God's will to prevail in our lives. Prayer may not bring water to parched fields, nor mend a broken bridge, nor rebuild a ruined city. But prayer can water an arid soul, mend a broken heart, rebuild a weakened will. We rise now for the Tefillah, page 64 in our virtual prayer books.
Adonai sifata tiftach ufi agi tehillatcha. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu v'Elohei avotenu v'imotenu, Elohei Avraham, Elohei Yitzhak v'Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel v'Elohei Leah. האל הגידול הגיבור והנורא, אל עליון גומר חסדים טובים וקונה הכל וזוכר השדה אבות ואימהות ומביא גאולה לבני בניהם למען שמו באהבה. מלך עוזר ומשיח ומגן, ברוך אתה אדוני מגן אברהם ועזרת שרה. אתה גיבור לעולם אדוני, מחיי הכל אתה רב להושיע. מכלכל חיים בחסד, מחיה הכל ברחמים רבים, סומך נופלים ורופא חולים, ומתיר אסורים, ומקיים אמונתו לשני עפר. מי כמוך מר גבורות ומדוע מלך, מלך ממית ומחיה ומצמיח ישועה, ונאמן אתה לחיות הכל. ברוך אתה אדוני מחיה הכל. אתה קדוש ושמך קדוש, וקדושים בכל יום יהללוך סלה. ברוך אתה אדוני האל הקדוש.
You may be seated as we continue on page 73 of our virtual prayer books. May these hours of rest and renewal open our hearts to joy and our minds to truth. May all who struggle find rest on this day. May all who suffer find solace. May all who hurt find healing on this day. May all who despair find purpose. May all who hunger find fulfillment on this day, and may this day fulfill its promise. Baruch atah Adonai, Mekadesh HaShabbat. Ritzeh Adonai Eloheinu God of goodness, we give thanks for the gift of life, wonder beyond words, for the awareness of soul, our light within, for the world around us so filled with beauty, for the richness of the earth which day by day sustains us. For all these and more, we offer thanks. Baruch atah Adonai, hatov shimcha, u'lecha ne'eh lehodot.
Shalom Rav al Yisrael Amcha Tasim Leolam. Shalom Rav al Yisrael Amcha
Grant us peace, your most precious gift, O eternal source of peace, and give us the will to proclaim its message to all the peoples of the earth. Bless our country as a safeguard of peace, its advocate among the nations. May contentment reign within our borders, health and happiness within our homes. Strengthen the bonds of friendship and fellowship among all the inhabitants of every land. Plant virtue in every soul, and may the love of your name hallow every home and every heart. Praised are you, Eternal One, who blesses our people with peace. Baruch atah Adonai, hamivarech et amo Yisrael b'shalom. At this time in our service, we ask for healing on all those who suffer from the pain of illness, all those whose souls are troubled by depression and anxiety during this time of COVID-19. And of course, oh God, we ask for healing for our fractured nation. We turn in our virtual prayer books to page 271 as we sing our prayer for healing, the Misha Berach.
Sheberach avotenu mekol habracha leimotenu. May the source of strength who bless the ones before us help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say, Amen. Sheberach imotenu mekor habracha leavotenu. Bless those in need of healing with refuah shlema. The renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say, Amen.
We pause now for a moment of silent prayer.
Say shalom b'mromav, Yaseh shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael, ve'al kol Yisrael,
The COVID-19 pandemic dramatically changing the way that we live our lives on a daily basis. A vaccine that is still elusive, and over 1,000 people in our nation dying daily. Too many cities with protests becoming riots, and an increase in random acts of violence. The usual name-calling as election season approaches, uncertainty about the opening of our schools for in-class instruction, fights over the wearing of masks in public venues, questions about whether the post office will be able to process and accurately account for mail-in ballots, a nation beset by racial injustice and an increase in anti-Semitism here in the United States and all over the world. It seems that every single story on the news is more depressing than the next. Well, not every single story. On August 13th, just a few weeks ago, the United Arab Emirates, the UAE, and Israel made peace with each other. We have been told for decades that peace between Israel and her neighbors was impossible unless there was a resolution of the Palestinian issue. That premise has been at the core of Middle Eastern peace efforts for years. But the agreement between the UAE and Israel now demonstrates that such a prerequisite for Middle Eastern peace was misguided. Nations, first and foremost, want security, and they want economic opportunities that bring growth. The UAE is no exception, and with a belligerent Iran and its terrorist proxies threatening regional stability, the UAE has come to view Israel's power of deterrence as a strategic asset. How so? Israel shares an unusually good relationship with the United States at the moment, and the positive relationship between the UAE and Israel changes the way in which the UAE is perceived by Congress, and indeed makes it more probable that the UAE could potentially receive sophisticated weaponry from the United States, especially as the UAE has its eyes on the F-35 Joint Strike Fighter jet. Israel also excels in counterterrorism intelligence, skills increasingly attractive to the UAE, according to retired Israeli Ambassador Yoram Ettinger, as the UAE has become a leader in the Arab battle against global Islamic terrorism. Ambassador Ettinger also notes an economic benefit to the UAE, and that the UAE is the second largest economy in the Middle East, with the seventh largest proven oil reserves in the world, and very successful in transitioning its economy from an oil-based to a diversified economy. Therefore, the UAE regards Israel's achievements in commercial high-tech, agriculture, irrigation, medicine, and health as a useful platform to bolster the diversification of the economies of its 7 federated emirates. It is clear that the UAE has much to gain from its new peace with Israel, even as it deals with the fallout from the Palestinians, who view the UAE's olive branch with Israel as a stab in the back. The UAE has countered opposition by suggesting that the move to create peace with Israel has suspended Israel's proposed annexation of certain areas in the West Bank. But truth be told, strategically speaking, the Israelis are more valuable to the UAE than the Palestinians. Indeed, if more Arab nations do follow the UAE's example and move to normalize relations with Israel, the Palestinians might be forced to confront their own intransigence and make changes as it comes to the realization that the Palestinian conflict is hardly the central issue when it comes to having peace and stability in the Middle East. Israel, too, has much to gain from this agreement. The UAE has formally ended its boycott, and now economic activity between the two nations is permitted. Health ministers from both nations are already collaborating on COVID-related issues, and hopefully Monday's flight by El Al from Israel to the UAE is a harbinger of increased trade with the Emirates and hopefully increased tourism as well when COVID-19 is under control. Well, it has been pointed out that this peace is different, as this agreement was the result of peace through strength and not peace for land. There are ramifications to this peace agreement that may have an influence on future Israeli policy in the West Bank. As Robert Satloff, executive director of the Washington Institute, suggests, Israel needed peace with the Egyptians and needed peace with the Jordanians. Peace between the UAE and Israel is not needed, but it is desired because it benefits both countries. Having said that, the UAE, which through this agreement has been able to affect Israeli policy regarding the annexation of certain areas in the West Bank, may in the future use such leverage to enhance their relationship, using the Palestinian issue to press Israel for more concessions and more opportunities. Furthermore, other Arab nations might follow the example of the UAE, but make potential arrangements and agreements contingent on Israel's treatment of the Palestinian issue. If that does happen, Israel will be forced to make critical decisions. Which is ultimately more important? Territorial concessions to the Palestinians or normalized relationships with Arab nations not sharing borders with the Jewish state? At the same time, many Arab nations, seeing the potential benefit that comes with normalized relationships with Israel, may view Palestinian anger as less important than Israeli technology, especially as they focus on their own security and economic needs. Time will tell. Satloff also notes the limitations of this new peace agreement when he observes that this arrangement does not resolve or even fundamentally alter any of Israel's other strategic challenges, whether it is the nuclear threat from Iran, the missile threat from some sub-state actors on its borders, or the binational threat from the unresolved conflict with the Palestinians. Satloff is correct. This agreement hardly guarantees regional peace, but it is a step in the right direction, and in the face of so much bad news, we can find some solace in this unanticipated good news. Shabbat Shalom to all of you. I hope that you have received, if you haven't, you should receive shortly our September bulletin. It will have a schedule of events for the month of September, of course, and the High Holy Days. In the coming days and weeks, you will also receive much more detailed information about the holy days, Some of the experiences will be virtual. Some, we hope, will be in person in our parking lot. So please stay tuned, and we will provide you with all the details necessary. Once again, Shabbat Shalom. Thank you, Bob. Thank you, Andy. Thank you, Kyle, for helping to make our service so beautiful and available to everybody this evening. We turn now to our concluding prayers. The Aleinu is found in our virtual prayer book, page 300. Will you please rise?
גדולה ליוצא בראשית, שלא עשנו כגויי הארצות, ולא שמנו כמשפחות האדמה, שלא שמחו חינוכם, וגורלנו ככל עמונם. ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים, נבנה מלך מלכי המלכים, הקדוש ברוך הוא. ונאמר והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ. ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד, ושמו
You may be seated. We continue now in our virtual prayer books on page 309. There are stars up above so far away, we only see their light long, long after the star itself is gone. And so it is with people that we loved. Their memories keep shining ever brightly, though their time with us is done. But the stars that light up the darkest night, these are the lights that guide us. As we live our days, these are the ways we remember. At this sacred moment of our Shabbat worship, we think longingly and lovingly of Mary Ann Fetterman, Nancy Geffert, Eli Benstein, Leo Krawitz, Dr. Bradley Sachs, and Julie Teague, all taken from us during recent weeks. We name two at this time, those whose yahrzeits, the anniversary of whose passing occurs, as on this Shabbat we recall Philip Ackerman, Sidney Barron, Abe Benjamin, Esther Bilstein, Julie A. Kane, Jenny Davis, Marie Cohn Dettelbach, Dr. Raymond Fetterman, Emmanuel Fischler, Edith Franklin, Emmanuel Friedlander, Edith Shell Friedmar, Mally Dublon Gamiel, Mildred Winkler Gosman, L. Robert Herman, William E. Hemmelhoek, Retha L. Irvin, Harold Jaffe, Bernice Kahn, Charlotte Calnez, Richard LaValle, Fanny Leitner, Andrea Lobert Moore, Viola Miller, Jenny Mittenthal, Alex Moore, Doris Ornstein, Nathan D. Osterman, Ann Goodman Pollock, Alexander Joseph Reiner, Samuel M. Rogalski, Mervyn Russell, Amos Schragenheim, Dora Schwartz, Dr. Morris W. Selman, Bernice K. Siegel, Jenny Silverman, Morris B. Singer, Joseph B. Smith, Laurie Staggs, and Joanne Schwartzberg. Let us turn now in our virtual prayer books to page 312 as we rise to sanctify the name of God with the words of the Kaddish. Yitgadal v'yitkadash shemei rabbah bi'alma divrach yirutei v'yamlich malchutei b'chayechon v'yomechon uv'chaye dechol beit Yisrael ba'agala uv'izman kari v'imru amen. Shemei rabbah mivarach le'olamo lemei almaya yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitramam v'yitnaseh v'yithadar v'yitaleh v'yithalal shemei dekud shah barihu Ela min kol birchata v'shirata tushbechata v'nechamata da'amiran bi'alma v'imru amen. Shalom Rabba min Shemaya v'chayim aleinu v'yal kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Oseh shalom b'imromav u'ya'aseh shalom aleinu v'yal kol Yisrael v'imru amen. May the source of peace send peace to all who mourn, give comfort to all who are bereaved, here and everywhere, as together we say, amen. We conclude our service this evening as we join together in singing Adon Olam, page 321 in the virtual prayer book.
Adon Olam Asher Malach B'terem Kol Yitzir Nivra Le'et Nasa V'chetzol Kol Azai Melech Shemo Nikra Ve'acharei Kichlot HaKol Nivado Yimloch Noda Ve'hu Haya Ve'hu Hove Ve'hu Yeh B'tifara Ve'hu Echad Ve'en Sheni Le'amshir Lo Le'achmira B'li Reshit B'li Tachlit Ve'lo Ha'oz Ve'ham Yisra Ve'hu Eli Ve'chagvali V'tzruchem li Be'tzara Ve'hu nisi v'masnos li Menat kosi Be'yom ekra Be'yado Afkid ruchi Be'erishan Be'ahira Ve'im ruchi Geviati Adonai Ve'lo ira.
And will you join us in the Kiddush, page 23 of our virtual prayer books.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei piri hagafen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddeshanu b'mitzvotav v'ratzavanu ושבת קודשו באהבה וברצון הנקילנו, זיכרון למעשה וראשית, כי הוא יום תחילה למקרא קודש, זכר יציאת מצרים. קיוונו ובחרת, ואותנו קידשת מכל העמים, ושמר קודשך באהב וברצון הנחלתנו. ברוך אתה אדוני מקדש השבת. אמן. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם, המוציא לחם מן הארץ. אמן.
Shabbat Shalom.